over here. Hello. Yoink, yoink, yoink. Extra magnet upgrade, not that I need one, but yay! Ooh, dragon scale. That might be useful. Ooh, what's this? Oh my god! Oh my god! Ow! Ow! That's hilarious. Give me some shulker shells, I could use those. Oh, there's diamonds in here. Oh, you teleported, that's why. Thank you. Fast mode, yes, please. That, didn't seem to have much in it, but that's okay. Random pile of endstone bricks. Oh, by the way, these micro missiles are hilarious. I can make them because it's just a thing from Pneumaticraft, but it's a bit wasteful. But they're hilarious nonetheless. Have you seen them before? Has anyone in chat seen them before? Or do you want to see them? They don't work on Enderman. Like, at all, because it's a projectile, but still funny when you use them on anything else. What's this? You are a random pillar of obsidian. Ugh, another phantom. I mean, it would work on the phantom, actually, because they are... I just need to get close enough for it to lock on. It's not particularly accurate, but whoosh! Whoosh! Whee! This is so silly! Ah! This actually might work on Enderman. I think it's technically an explosion. Do you think I have enough projectiles going off? Just boom! Well, this actually does work on Enderman. It's explosives. That's funny. This is funny. It's just like throwing fire charges around. It doesn't work very well against the the other bosses, but it's still fun. They're really easy to make, so I can make more of them pretty easily. What are you? Oh, no, no, no. I don't like those. I remember those. We don't want to deal with those. That is a really annoying debuff. They will just... They cause an Ender virus debuff that has like a 10-minute duration on it, and when it ends, you just die. It sucks. A lot. What are you? Rose quartz. Ammo light. I'm actually going to dip underneath some of these because there is a unobtainium down in here, I think it is. Unobtainium, which just spawns at the bottom of these places sometimes, which sucks, but I may need to get myself an unobtainium charm. Unobtainium vision charm might be my only answer to finding them, because you can't harvest them with quarries. So the solution is to set up a quarry, an exclusionary quarry, so you just quarry everything but everything but it, and void basically everything, and then collect the stuff by hand after you've cleared off like an entire island out of existence. It's functional. I don't like it. Okay, I'm looking for a proper end city. because I would like to get a elytra for later crafting purposes. I can't remember what. There's something I wanted from the elytra. I think I needed it for something for the creativerite stuff. And it certainly doesn't hurt to find some random unobtainium here. All right. I can't vein mine the unobtainium. But I got some. Capsid from Alex's mobs. Okay, so I wasn't, strictly speaking, after the unobtainium, but I did find some, apparently. There's that. What are you? Oh, you're an evoker! Hi. I'm flying, so you can't actually hurt me. Well, aside from the Vexes, I guess. Ugh, you're not worth my time. I'm leaving. Endergrade. Yes. Because that was a thing. Apotheosis mobs just have too much defense, too much HP, too much regen. They're not worth my time. I can kill them. But, it's dreadfully inefficient. Looking for things. Oh, I'm backtracking. How about over there? Have we been over there yet? That's Azure Silver. Ooh. I forgot I'm in fast mode. Fast mode is fast. That's quartz. Another evoker. That's Azure Silver. Well, I'm gonna have no shortage of endstone at this rate. I keep accidentally blowing it up. Maybe I should turn down my pickaxe. It's a little bit ridiculous right now. Forest Twist. Silver. No way! Ow! Jeez. Okay. Fine. Ow. Jerk. What's this? Ah, there's a random end crystal. Another one that fills the dungeons things. I mean, I don't mind the extra shulker shells, but it seems a bit weird to include this random end crystal. And there's some Vexes out here. Oh. Ha! Of course there's a block of diamond underneath it. It's like a fragment of a dragon. Yeah, it's like a fragment of a dragon spawn section. Like, they were... That's actually kind of clever. It's like the world has decided that it wants another dragon in here, except it hasn't finished. I'm not complaining. It's actually pretty cool. Clever design. Okay, that's the evoker. I'm looking for Highlands, because that is what has the that is what has the end cities. There's Midlands, is what I'm on right now. This is again a mild issue I have with biome mods. in mod packs with quests. It's nice that there's a large variety of things, but it does irritate me when you don't make use of the extra variety. So it's like, oh, hey, yeah, so there's more biomes, okay. Do you do anything with the Biomes of Plenty more biome stuff? No, why would I? So why did you put it in? Like, it makes sense when you're trying to do a decorative thing, and it's like, oh, this is just vanilla plus, and we have more biomes, as that's a thing, and it's like, okay, well, that's fine. Because the goal in that case is decorative, right? But in this case, like, why should I even? Ender Globe Spawn. Ender Globe Spawn. I can't even break that. Nope, okay. Go into fast mode. Break it. Can I break it? I cannot break it. Oh. There it goes. It spawned the Ender Globe. Oh, I see. I see. This is called an Ender Globe. I get it now. I'm gonna walk away from that. I already dealt with one of those. That's called an Ender Globe spawn. It just didn't pick right away. That's weird, but okay. Bye. Cool. Bye. Ooh, End City. Do you have what I'm looking for? There's no ship. You suck. Okay, can I make end rods? Is there a recipe? Yeah. Chorus fruit, popped chorus fruit, and blaze rods makes end rods. So I'll still collect the ones that I can see in here, though. Because that will be handy, nonetheless. The city at the end of the game. Presumably there will be more end cities at some point, but it wouldn't hurt to have some shulker shells, I suppose. How many have I got? I have 27 shulker shells. It's not too bad, I guess. Pop that in there. And 23 end rods is not bad. A neat sword, some gems. I was hoping for more from this end city. I remember needing the elytra for something. Ooh, hey, this is a new warper. Just double check. Elytra. I don't know if I need it for anything. I need it for the elytra blueprint, but I don't know if I need it for anything else. I can make copies once I get some dragon scales, which is pretty useful. Ignitium elytra chest plate. I'll have to go into the nether and take a look at that. Where do you take me, sir? Oh, you took me back to the start. That's pretty clever. Swoosh me away, please and thank you. Alright, that's the Ender Sphere, I guess is what it's called. It's got pretty cool stuff in it, if you can spend the time looking through it. I don't want to do it again. What's over here? Have I been over here? Ow! Another phantom following me around. That's another Ender Sphere spawner, so let's not stand inside it this time. That is some kind of angry-looking tree. Shulker tree. That's pretty cool. I'm not going to complain, it's a tree with shulkers on it. Why is there an angry Vex chasing me? I'm walking away from the angry Vex. Is that a shulker? There's a shulker. Nothing there, but 'tis a shulker. Even when flying in fast mode, this pickaxe is ridiculous. Maybe I should remove the maybe I should remove the haste ring and replace it with the power ring. That might be a good choice here. Oh, another phantom. Alright. I'm looking for more Azure Silver mostly. Just so I can have a good stock of it when I go to use some more silent tools late game stuff. I don't think there's a way to get Azure Silver in this pack in an infinite manner. So my best bet is to just farm what I can while I'm here. End Barrens. Small end islands. Ah, there's another end city. Airship? No airship. I want an elytra. Give me an elytra. Y'all suck. Oh, there's another orb just spawned. Just let me zip in here real quick and go boop, boop, boop. Ooh, hey, netherite. Boop. And Ring of Slowness Resistance is a new ring. Okay, bye. Thanks, bye. How's my capacitor doing? 27 out of 28. I think we're okay. Even after how much I've been using it, that's actually pretty good. Breakfast has been nommed! Yay, breakfast. What was your breakfast? I am curious. Ooh, did they just put random bone blocks in here? They did. Oh, nope, I'm not dealing with you. Nope. I know what they do. Not interested. Scrambled eggs, sausage, and beef. That does sound good. Lots of rose quartz. Hello, Azure Silver. Random obsidian pillar just under the platform. Yeah, no, it's fine. We'll be fine down here. Well, that is a thing I did by accident. I'm being attacked by Vexes again. There's a dude around. I think it's actually more likely that apotheotic mobs can randomly spawn Vexes sometimes, which makes them frustrating. I'm actually curious how many levels I have stored up right now. Jeez. Because I picked up the XP storage skill, so I actually don't know how much XP I have stored. There's a lot, I'm sure. I mean, I killed the dragon, and I killed a lot of apotheotic bosses. Another one of these things. Just bonk them with a disassembler, why don't you? Well, the Enderman was in my way. So I'll molecular disassemble their head. It's their fault for getting in my way. Besides, the assembler is actually a pretty good weapon. Ow! And I would hate to try and traverse this without an elytra. Hate to traverse this with just ender pearls. Can you imagine? People do it all the time, and I cannot imagine doing it myself. It's a giant nightmare to do. I'm so used to just being able to fly some form or another because it's modded. I don't think I ever do anything like that outside of this. Oh, this one doesn't have a treasure chest in it. I see. Ow. A lot of bone blocks. End pillar. Different shaped end pillar, actually. Ow. Okay, I heard that. I don't even know what that was, but I heard it. The atomic disassembler booper is like my favorite tool from Mechanism. It is mildly a pain in the butt though, because it's sometimes not too easy to make or keep charged. But look at it go. Useful nonetheless. Say, how many do I got now? We have 234. Stop interrupting me. 234 Azure Silver now. Oh, I am getting out of the way before that pops. Because that'll pop. Oh, hey. I don't know what that's doing out in the middle of nowhere, but there we go. Seriously, Mr. Enderman, you're in my way. And I have essentially just decided that the apotheotic bosses are just not worth my time. I can fight them if I wanna, but nah. These names. Oh, why? What was that one? I didn't see what that one was, sorry. I wasn't paying attention. Fish Bro Sig the Super. Ooh, that one's got weakness. Getting tired of wandering around out here. I was hoping I could get an elytra before I wandered back home, but I may have to just come back. If I want the elytra, I may have to come back for it. Or cheat one in now that I've been here. I can just be like, hey, yeah, no, I would have found one eventually, but I was reliant on mobs, world gen, and we're getting crowded out. Which is actually true. I don't mind, like I said, I don't mind having Phil's dungeons. And I don't mind having biomes of plenty. And Korg adds a bunch of stuff too in the end, of course. But like, if you're going to include all of these things, maybe do something with it. Dr. Michael Eckelin. The only thing I'm getting out of value out of the various dungeons and stuff is random chests. And that is only relevant insofar as that gets me access to rings from the Rings of Ascension mod. But I already have the best ring from the Rings of Ascension mod because this pack kind of is kind of intended to have me craft my own ring. The Ring of Flight, that is. Dr. Olivia the Dragonborn. I thought I saw something down there. I don't see anything down here. I thought I saw something down here. I was wrong. Ooh. Ow. Seriously. I hear end noises. Blue Post Cow the Odd. Little baby end city. End house, what I'm going to call them from now on. And this one has another one of these. First one I encountered had a chest in it, but not this time, I guess. Overseer Garir the Dragonborn. This one should have a chest in it. It did not. It just had a shulker. I'm not really complaining about shulkers. I will eventually be able to make more shulkers. To be honest, I should I should make myself a swab and come back. And then swab a shulker, and we can make a shulker spawner. Because we have chorus fruits, so we can neuter the AI on those things, and we can put an ender dislocator to stop them from teleporting. There's an ender house, like, way down there! Ooh, another city. Do you have an airship? You're a big one. Jimmy the Superior is on it. No airship, though. You suck. They have the big launch pad, but no thing for it. I don't particularly care to go through those. It just annoys me. I may just go home and then come back later. I got more or less everything that I came in here for. For decorative purposes, I might actually grab some of this stuff. The Myolite from Quark is actually pretty cool. It's colorful. I am receiving a phone call. Excuse me. From Montreal. I'm going to answer that and see what's up. Oh, I'm sorry, you have this account with an excessive amount of Bitcoin under your name. It's like, since when have I ever considered doing anything with Bitcoin? I love those scams. They're like, oh, well, then we're going to expire this and you're going to lose out on all this Bitcoin. I'm like, that's fine. It's not real anyways. Hello. Shiny things. Take that too. Telepathic Iron Sword of Distant Battles. 3% chance to be a loot pinata. Oh no. That sounds hilarious. Terrible at the same time. Also, follow-up question. Since when has Bitcoin ever been, like... It's such a weird thing. It's like, it's valuable, but it's not? It's so hard to pin down any actual, like, use for it. I don't know. It's like, you could just say, it's like, oh, well, it's money. It's like, well, come up with a better scam then, lady. Ooh, let's just pop this time. Diamond block. Yoink. Ooh, hey, another one of these. Oh, no, we're going to avoid that. Oh, I didn't know you guys flew. Rude. Okay, fills mob ender shulker tree. Some silver. Ow, ooh, you hurt. You have a shiny toy. Andrew the Curious, you have a shiny thing. Oh man, you have an anti-armor item as well. Holy crap. That is an anti-armor tool. Not sure if I really want to. I'm tempted, but it won't. One of the bosses fell into the void. Yep, I am intentionally making the bosses fall into the void. It is a thing. Oh, that's rose quartz. Don't care about that. And that's amylite. I appreciate that they have different textures. I don't know what I would do if the Azure Silver had the same texture as some of the other Silent Gem stuff. Because it's all the same color. Well, it may not be the same color. I don't know for sure if it is. But to my eye, it looks like it's the same color, so I really couldn't tell you. I really want an Elytra, and I'm mostly just collecting extra Azure Silver so I can make Azure Electrum, but... And it's not the Crimson Steel that I want out of that, but the Azure Electrum is used to make Tier 3 grading materials, which is going to be useful. And Tyrian Steel. Tyrian Steel might be the best material, but I think I might just for ease of making it, I might go with I might change out my armor from Crimson Steel into Reinforced Obsidian, just because it's easier to work with. I'll lose my Fireproof, which is mildly irritating, I guess. I would like to be Fireproof, but if it's a good trade-off if it's better armor and easier to repair, because I can't make Crimson Iron all that easily. And by extension, I can't really make Crimson Steel all that easily. Side effect of being in the end, I can get Chorus Fruits now, which I did, so I can disable the AI and mob spawners. Just takes one per spawner, so it's not like I need all that much. Then we have Shulker Shells. I can't remember what I needed Shulker Shells for. I think Twinite. I think one of the steps for Twinite needs Shulker Shells, I'm sure of it. Well, this requires me to go and do stuff. This requires me to go and do stuff. We'll get there. I can make Twinite, I think. I just need to make a lot more Endurium, and then we can make Twinite, and then we can do things with said Twinite. But that is a good question. What can I do with Shulker Shells? Aside from making green heart canisters and shulker boxes, I can make Shellite dust with bronze and apatite, and then the Shellite dust can make Shellite ingots. Is that not the Shellite that I was supposed to be making? Interesting. It's kind of not. Yeah, no, that's the wrong kind of Shellite. I can use that to make Shellite tier stuff from thermal. Interesting. But what I need is Twinite, which normally takes Shellite to make. I'm bypassing Shellite! That's really cool! Because Thermal Extra normally goes Shellite, Soul Infused, Endurium Infused, Shellite, then Twinite. Using the Shellite to make Twinite. But they've changed the recipe in this pack, so that's actually okay. Also, that's another in-city. Still no airship, eh? Ha! Airship! I'm sorry, what? Mine cube. Oh my god, it's copying my sword. Oh lord. I am worried about that. It copied my sword. Backpack. Dragon scale. Ring of knockback resistance. Anything else good in here? Not really. How about you? I'm not sure what I just did. I grabbed something that I'm not sure I really wanted. Wunderbar dust. I think I need that. Okay. Page with skill extra health. Yes, I did want that. Yes, please. I did want that skill. Gimme! Up to plus 20 for plus 10 extra hearts. Oh, yes. I did want that. Didn't even realize that was an option. Okay, let's see. Do you have a dragon head? Give me dragon head. Yay, dragon head. Yoink. Okay, I got what I wanted. Okay, now, I'm curious. Hi. Ow. Stop moving around. You now have a copy of my bow. That's actually kind of funny. That's actually kind of funny. They actually take a copy of whatever weapon I hit them with. Mimicubes. Alright. Interesting creatures. Home! Alright, let's deposit some things. Oh, also, let's check this. Got anything in it? No. Alright. Time to craft. Yeah, time to craft all the things. Hang on. I need... pipe upgrade is what I need. And I need to borrow this spot right here. Oh, and a pipe. Whoopsie. And a wrench. Womp. Yoink all the things! That's better. That's a much nicer way of putting things away. See? Oop. Slow mode, please. Thank you! Turn that off. Plop that down there for now. Okay. Let's grab this. We can put these away, that away, that away. So I don't think I need anything else here. Alright. Let me take a look at rings. I have ring of bonus resist now, and I have several rings of strength, and we have several rings of knockback resistance, which we don't need right now. But I'll take that ring of strength next time I go wandering around. I seem to have barely touched any of my foods here. Intriguing. Also, I'm going to yoink that. because now I can stack my food a little bit nicer. Doesn't hurt. Alright, quest, boss hunting. We killed the dragon. We got the dragon egg. Yay! Basic collector. We collected the stack of netherite ingots. I don't think there was anything else I did right now, so that'll be fine. We got stuffs. More blast furnaces. Really stop doing that. That's really kind of getting annoying. Also... Cool. So now I can work my way towards Twinite, but before we do that, I need to press the RB button. I'm trying to be good about this. I need to take stretch breaks relatively frequently, and I've gone 3 hours without standing up right now, so I need to do that. So, I will be right back. And we return. Apologies for the delay. Alright, I wanted to... see if we can process some of this Azure Silver. I think we can get like 600 plus out of this because we can process this with a double now, right? Obviously we can furnace it. Ooh, all we can do is furnace it, actually. I can make a washing factory with some liquid meat. That requires pink slime ingot. That's irritating. That only gets me 2 for 1 anyways. Right? It's 50 millibuckets? Or is it 100 millibuckets in the sieving? 100 millibuckets in the sieve gives me dust. And then the dust can be cooked to make things. Is there Azure Silver dust? There is. And the only way to get 2 of the dust per 1... Up to 500 millibuckets. I guess we can try this. We can try making a meat station, but I really don't want to do it. Because the fermenter... In order to run the fermenter, you need... Oh, it just ferments it straight up. What do you mean up to 500 millibuckets? You know, I've never actually used one of these fermenting stations before. Oh well. So we've got like 300 of this raw Azure Silver. I guess we can just cook it. I can go back and get more if I need it. I feel like I'm not going to need as much silver, but better. Here's my full stack of it. For quest complete. Okay, and that is in better gear. Which is not a surprise. Bag of gems. Oh, look at that. Alright, so the Azure Silver can be used to make unknown alloy ingots, obviously. We can also use it to make Azure Electrum, but I don't think there's a recipe for Azure Electrum in the alloy thing. So we've made 8 Azure Electrum, because why not? Alright, first of all, I would like to make an Azure Electrum repair kit. Even more bang for your back! And what else can we do with the Azure Electrum? Because there was more stuff, right? Recrystallize it. And Electrum dust for things. And how are you from materials, anyways? Here for malleable accelerate light. Not terrible, but I think the better stuff elsewhere. So, Tyrian steel is what I would like to make. In order to make Tyrian steel, I definitely need the Azure Electrum, Crimson Steel, Crushed Shulker Shell, and a Netherite Scrap. And that makes some rather dumb effective. Wow. Harvest level 5, harvest speed 18 base, whereas I can do refined obsidian, which is what I'm doing right now. Harvest level's not as good, obviously, but harvest speed is way higher, so I think we'll just stick with the refined obsidian. It's easier to make anyways. Armor value 30. Armor value 25. Yeah, refined obsidian is just better for armor. I like the repair kit though, so take the refined obsidian. Let's even make some more of that. We are, however, going to use the end rods instead of my blaze rods for tool rods. Because my attack damage goes down? What? You have flexible, sturdy, and refractive. Takes less damage but cancels with brittle. Don't have brittle. Sturdy will frequently take less damage, whereas I can flexible and reach. Because you just have malleable, flexible, and reach, whereas you have flexible, sturdy, and refractive. I already have refractive, right? Place phantom lights. Got refractive from somewhere else. I think I put that on my tool tip. So we can reclaim the blaze rods, I guess. Alright, let's do that for the... we've got the sword. That's good. We don't need the Paxel, I don't think. Because the Paxel I'm using as an axe. Oh, actually, wait, I've got a machine for that now, so I guess it doesn't matter for that. But I suppose tool rods don't matter too much. I will replace this one because it's blaze right now, and this will 9.8 versus 9.86. So you lose 0.06 damage value, but I think that's okay. Because that will make it a little bit more durable. Less likely to break my stuff. Same with you. Construction is... You're still a compressed iron tool rod. I should fix that. Oh, I apparently can't. Why can I not? Maybe because it's not repaired. Well, you're refined obsidian, so let's repair it. In the meantime, give me that. Oh. Wait, what? Oh, because that's compressed iron. That's the wrong repair kit. I want this repair kit. Guess I don't even need that one anymore. I'm not using compressed iron anymore. Haha! No, I straight up cannot replace the tool rod on that. That's actually really interesting. When one of the toolkits runs out, I will replace it, because it's not worth replacing, because there's 43 units of obsidian left in that thing, and it's only a 5% improvement. And you don't get your bits back. Okay, let's make some more refined obsidian. And then we can start grading it. Let's make... silent grade materials. I want... Greater Catalyst Tier 3. Will require some nether bananas. I have 27 nether bananas. I can't grow this, which is actually really irritating. We can do popped chorus fruit, and we can do these emerald shards. Chorus root, and let's make a drawer. I have a drawer. What do you make when I grow you in a pot? 2, so we need a 2x1 drawer. Alright, 2x1 drawer. Botany pot and some end stone. Alright. And then we can grow some chorus fruit here because we couldn't be bothered to do any sort of inclusion here. Do that and that. And then leave that alone for a bit. Let it do its thing. It will be fine. How much of this stuff does it make? 8? Since we're growing it, we'll just do this much.